I mean, back then, I think milk as food was probably costing us like maybe like $20, but her vet bills were in the hundreds of dollars. After 30 days, I would say I seen massive improvements in her health. And I did see Milka's vet bills dramatically decrease.
Isn't it weird that we feed them the exact same thing every single day? You know, that's not how any species would be in the wild or by choice.
Is it okay for pet parents to add fresh food ingredients to commercial diets, or do pet parents have to make the full switch?
We saw 90% reduction in this type of cancer after, adding these to kibble for 3 times a week. It's hard for me to see something like that and then go like, yeah, but it's too much.
So just give it a try and watch them, and it's quite addicting, I think.
I would definitely say that it's so addicting, because once you start adding certain things and you're like, what else can I add? Oh, I can add oh, I can add some, oh, I can add.
Welcome back to the Next Level Pet Parent Podcast, everyone. Today, we're diving into a topic that is near and dear to my heart because it changed my life and my dog's life. Today, we are going to discuss how you can start adding fresh food to your pet's kibble or wet food. And here's why it matters. A study coming out of the University of Helsinki found that puppies who had just 20% of raw food added to their bowl of kibble showed a significantly lower prevalence of allergies and skin issues as adult dogs, and significantly reduced disease markers as well. This is very promising because it means that you do not have to completely switch your pet's food all at once. Even small changes like adding just a little bit of fresh food to the bowl can have a big impact on your pet's health and potentially lower your future vet bills. I can actually attest to this from first-hand experience because my French Bulldog's health turned around completely when I started introducing fresh food to her about 8 years ago. Her health issues went away, her digestion was better, and I no longer had to go to the vet every single month. I also know from personal experience that stepping into the world of fresh food feeding can feel overwhelming at first. You might be worried about the cost or about the time commitment, or you might just not know where to start. And that's okay, because we're all doing the very best that we can for our pets, and every single small step that we take counts. This episode is all about helping you take that next step to get to the next level. No guilt, no pressure, just practical tips and inspiration to help you introduce fresh foods into your pet's diet. To help us navigate this topic, I'm super excited to welcome 2 incredible pet nutrition expert guests, the founder of Green Juju and their vice president of nutrition and communication. Green Juju is a company leading the way in making fresh, whole food options more accessible for pet parents like us. In this episode, we'll talk about the benefits of adding fresh ingredients to the bowl. We're sharing easy ways to get started and remind you that it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Whether it's adding some fresh veggies to your dog's bowl or exploring new ways to enhance their nutrition, you walk away feeling inspired and ready to take action. Let's dive in and advance to the next level on our journey toward giving our pets their happiest, healthiest lives.
All right, today we have a super exciting topic. We are speaking about the benefits of fresh food for cats and dogs, and we will be speaking today with Kelley, the founder of Green Juju, as well as Billy, the vice president of nutrition and communications. Welcome, guys.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah, I'm super excited about this topic because for a long time we have been advocates of feeding a fresh food diet for cats and dogs, and we have seen tremendous improvements in our dog's health a long time ago when she had various concerns for skin problems and so much more. So I'm really excited about this because it's what led us to open our store today.
We're excited to be here.
So for those that are not familiar with Green Juju, can you tell us a little bit about yourselves? I could start with you, Kelley.
Green Juju is a pet food company that's focused on whole foods and limited ingredients and no synthetics and really good sourcing. It started 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, when, kind of similar to what you were saying, my dog Bailey, my yellow lab, was diagnosed with a rare joint tumor, and I didn't have there weren't a lot of conventional options. And so I was kind of left up to my own to figure out what to do next. And that opened my eyes to the world of whole foods and how that could benefit her. And then that was the beginning of Green Juju.
And you, Billy?
Well, I was looking for my next space in the pet food industry, and there's only one company in person I wanted to work for, and that was Kelley and Green Juju, because I saw all of the innovation that she had brought to the market. I saw, the authenticity, the integrity, all of those factors, and led me to me flying out to her and being like, please give me a job. And she did. So that's the wonderful thing. And here we are, 3.5 years later. And I think it's been my honor and privilege to be able to contribute to the vision that she set forth, when she started this company. So it's been a great experience for me.
Yeah, that's really exciting. Honestly, I love seeing you, the both of your growth, and also seeing Green Juju just explode and make such an impact for so many animals across not only America, but the world now.
Well, thank you. It's been a very, very fun ride.
So the market for minimally processed pet food is steadily growing every year. And we're seeing more and more pet parents credit fresh food diets for having a healthier pet, which includes raw food, freeze-dried food, as well as cooked food. In your opinion, what are the biggest benefits of incorporating fresh food into a dog's diet?
I always say that feeding fresh basically takes everything offensive away from dogs. So it helps them to not shed. It helps them to not smell. It makes their breath better. It makes their poop smaller. All the things that maybe a not dog person would be like, oh, dog. Like all those things just go away. And I think that's just a sign of how healthy they are. They shouldn't smell bad. They shouldn't have gross poop. Like those things aren't normal. If we saw that in a human, we'd be like, you need to change something there. So that's like the most simplistic way, I think, to explain the benefit of fresh foods. It takes all the bad things away, and then it helps them to just be vibrant and shining with health because they're not held back by those things.
We first introduced raw food to Milka, and I was absolutely astonished of the differences that I've witnessed. I've noticed right away smaller stools, and I just couldn't believe it because Milka back then, she was probably pooping like 3-4 times a day, and now she poops like maximum 2 times a day. And when she does poop, it's like so small. It's quite funny, honestly, looking at it.
And especially with a Frenchie, I mean, they're so gassy and like they're stinky little creatures. But like once you feed them the right thing, like I always called Bambi my Lamborghini, because if I maintained her so well, she was just perfect. But a lot of maintenance and feeding her all the right things.
Yeah.
Oh, do you guys like Frenchies? I had no idea. That's so weird.
I think vegetables and fruits are actually a really, really great way to get someone started on a fresher diet. And it may be more comfortable for that person, because a lot of the times when we speak to pet parents, they are like completely terrified of adding meat to their dog's food, but they're a lot more comfortable with the idea of adding some green vegetables and maybe even some fruits. Just a quick question. What would be like 3 of the top fruits or vegetables that you would recommend, that you would say, I absolutely love this one, and this one every pet parent should try to include into the diet?
Okay, so to answer that, I think the best thing to do is go off of seasons, because we are meant to work with the world and the seasons and everything. So I would go seasonally if you're making something at home.
Okay.
If it's the spring, you're going to want to go for like the bitter greens, like dandelion greens or arugula or spinach or blueberries or something like that. If you're in the more like wintry months like we are now, I would go for kale and turnip, maybe cranberries. So I would let the seasons guide you and then pick 3 things. I tend to stay away from starchy things. Everything's in balance, right?
Yeah.
there's going to be some great ingredients like beets that have properties that you're not going to get anywhere else. And even though they're starchy, you probably want to use a little bit of them just to get those great properties. But I wouldn't make it the base of the blend, right? You want the base to always be like a low glycemic, dark leafy green kind of thing. But yeah, I think seasons should guide.
If you've never fed something that's not a processed diet like kibble, I would say pick something you're comfortable with and then move forward. And by the time you start incorporating maybe, 3 or 4 different things, you'll find it's very, I think, easy to do that.
Is there any particular way that a pet parent should incorporate something like spinach or kale? Should it be grounded or anything like that? How would you recommend a pet parent to actually feed a fruit or a vegetable?
So the most important thing is to break down the plant cell walls, because dogs can't do that on their own. What we do is we juice it and then we blend it and put the pulp back in with the juice. So it's essentially pre-digesting it. And we feel that's the key to the dogs getting the most out of the plants. They're getting the nutrients, they're also getting the fiber. So that's why we do our method. If it's an at-home situation, some people will say you can steam and some people say puree or blend. The reason that you steam is because it's breaking down those plant cell walls. I'm not a huge fan of steaming because you're also losing nutrients with the heat. So I would prefer to throw some plants in a blender with a little water or bone broth or something like that and just blend it up. So yeah, that would be, and it's so easy. And I think people get kind of paralyzed about like, but which plants and how many and what do I do?
Yeah.
And there's a short list of things that you can't do, which is very easily Googleable. But they're not going to be any of the dark leafy greens and things you're looking at anyways. And then as long as you're doing things in moderate amounts and you're rotating, it's very unlikely that you're going to do too much. I wouldn't recommend like doing a head of spinach or a head of kale every day or something like that. But, get like 5 or 6 ingredients, throw a little bit in there, rotate it often, and you'll be good to go.
When you look up the total makeup of a diet, let's say on a caloric basis that plants would make, and keep in mind too, like the things that plants are high in aren't fat soluble. So it's not like you're worried about, adding too much, vitamin A or something like that. And so Kelley makes a very good point in that as long as you're kind of mixing that up, but the nice thing is when you look at that as a percentage of the calories, it's such a low amount that it would be very hard to kind of mess anything up, just to kind of reiterate your point, Kelley.
And then I guess as a pet parent becomes more comfortable with including vegetables, then we can start looking into maybe adding some fresh meat into the diet, would you say, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think that's where our principle of some is better than none. Like, I'm such a big believer in that. And, they say even up to 20% of the diet can make a huge difference, whether that's in vegetables or fresh meat. And, I think as all of us have experience with our pets, one of the coolest things about this is that you can like really make a change in your pet by what you put in the bowl. Like it's something that you have the ability to do. So just give it a try and watch them. And it's quite addicting, I think, because it's like, wow, what I just did,
Yeah. Yeah. So I would definitely say that it's so addicting because once you start adding certain things and you're like, what else can I add? Oh, I can add an egg. Oh, I can add some raw milk. Oh, I can add all of these things. And you start building this wonderful garden of food into the diet.
And then what I love in that is, again, I'm sure we've all felt this, but like the love that goes into that process. And then like you give that bowl to your pet and it's like, you're truly just giving them love. Like food is love. And it's just such a beautiful process to be like, I put so much thought and love into this and now I'm giving this to you and it's going to nourish your body. And it's just this beautiful thing. Can you tell
the energy? Yeah. No, the energy is such an important factor. And we hear holistic veterinarians actually talk about the energy that you put into the food while you are cooking and preparing that food definitely transfers into the meal and within the body as well of the pet that is consuming the food. So That is so true. The more that you love and enjoy to prepare the food, that's going to transfer over into your pet.
We have this kind of funny joke at my house. My husband's the cook of the house, and he makes this chicken soup that I love. And there was this time years ago where I was sick, and I was like, hey, can you make me the chicken soup? And we were kind of like bickering throughout the process of him cooking. And he made the soup, and afterwards I was like, something's off. Like, it's not right. And then we just decided it was not made with love. So it's been a joke at our house that like when something's really good, I'm like, oh, this was made with a lot of love, or like, oh, you're off today. But it's I think it's real.
No, most definitely. And I think the saying definitely comes from somewhere for sure.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. You got a lot of feelings in your cooking over there, Billy?
I'm a terrible cook. But as I talk about a lot, feeding the dog is my favorite activity. I do it once a day now, so that's been an interesting change. But I do it for me at the most important time, and that is the time I feel sort of most grounded, which is early in the morning in the kitchen with soft music playing and coffee in my hand, and it's just a real experience that me and Huckleberry get to share together. And the thing that I've learned recently as well, and I was just talking to our staff veterinarian, Dr. Keith Weingart, about this on Saturday, is this idea of just feeding love. Because I always break everything down into such small scientific things that, I have been accused by many people of being a robot, which is probably true. But I made a change recently. So I obviously have both of our foods, at both the freeze-dried and the frozen version of our foods, available to me. And I feed the freeze-dried version of our food for two reasons. Number one is I like to vary up how I rehydrate that. And I can do some kind of interesting things with that. And I think there's an interesting concept behind the moisture that we're putting back into it and being able to kind of like take that up a couple notches. But the other part, and the bigger part of that, is he just likes it better. He just gets way more excited. And I know this because it used to be that he'd wait on the couch, and then when I'm ready, I can, I bring him over and he saunters over and he eats it, and he really liked the frozen food. But now while I'm getting it ready, because it probably takes me longer than he wants it to, because I take my time and, enjoy it. He comes back and forth. And he's like, okay, are you done? We're good. I want the food. And so, that's a lot. I mean, that's a huge part of his day, is eating that food. And so the fact that I can, provide him with something that he absolutely just loves, is a new thing for me. And I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And so awesome that he would prefer the freeze-dried over the frozen raw. And for our listeners and viewers, the Green Juju frozen raw, as well as the freeze-dried raw, it's just the freeze-dried is just the moisture removed. Is that correct? Yeah. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah, you basically retain 97% of the nutrients versus about 99 with regular freezing. And so, it's just an interesting way to do that. And, just ideally, if you're feeding the freeze-dried food, make sure to rehydrate it really well. But it's a great option, especially for people who travel the world and need to buy 6 months worth at a time.
He's definitely talking about us right now. We are traveling with Green Juju freeze-dried raw. I'm going to move over to the next question, since we're talking about adding fresh food to the diet. So I think some pet parents, they might get kind of scared away from feeding a fresh food diet, because they think that if I commit to feeding maybe one meal, then I should stick with that. And a lot of the times, cost can be a factor in why a pet parent may choose not to feed a fresh food diet. So the next question I have is it okay for pet parents to add fresh food ingredients to commercial diets, or do pet parents have to make the full switch? Now, we kind of touched on this, but I just want to know what is your professional opinion on this?
Yeah, I think the way to relate that is just to yourself. You eat healthy and unhealthy things all the time in different ways. And so you wouldn't think to yourself, like, I may as well not eat this thing that's really healthy because I had Oreos 2 days ago. Like, what's the point at that point? So I think that's a really easy way to relate it. And, you know, I think it's an interesting dichotomy, because I do think, obviously, and this is a big part of my job and et cetera, I do think that there is something to say about balance, right? About the food being balanced. Our food is, complete and balanced to AFCO standards. And I do think that that's a really important thing. But I also don't want people to get too rigid with, I can't add anything because it's going to upset X, Y, and Z. I think that comes from the old guard of pet food, 20, 30, 40 years ago, of like, we feed dogs and cats like chickens, and we feed dogs and cats like sheep. This is sheep food. Like, if you've ever gone to a petting zoo, they have the same food for every animal that you can like put in the quarter thing and take it out, because it's like, balanced. But so there's a role that balance plays, particularly with our food. We actually made it so limited and balanced, so you can kind of do whatever you want on top of that, and you're not really going to upset that balance very much. But the idea that we can't add in one or two things is just totally wrong to me.
I would reframe, like, isn't it weird that we feed them the exact same thing every single day? That's not how any species would be in the wild or by choice. So I think that's kind of a reframe. And then in terms of just the concern of like, are things complete and balanced? Is this okay? Again, I would go back to that 20%. I think you have 20% to play with in terms of what you're going to add to the bowl. If you end up going beyond that 20% regularly, at that point, I would probably consider switching your base to a different complete and balanced that you're comfortable with. Maybe if you're on a processed food now and you don't want to go to raw, maybe you look at a dehydrated or a freeze-dried or a lightly cooked or something else that's complete and balanced, and you can continue to add the 20% fresh food stuff on top of that, but it will still give you the reassurance that the core of the meal is complete and balanced. On a regular basis, you probably don't want to be doing like 50% processed and 50% free for all, just because at that point you get into who knows.
Nutritional issues. So the next question I have here is, what advice do you have for pet parents who are worried about the cost or the time commitment of incorporating fresh food?
For me, when I got into this, I was younger, self-employed. I didn't have a huge budget, but my dog was also my world, and I took a leap at trying to save her, essentially. And I was shocked at how easily I was able to find other things to cut out of my budget once I saw what an impact it had on her. And not to say that it's a small amount, but I was able to find ways. And I think with a lot of things, you weigh things differently when you see the impact that they have. And then in terms of time and convenience, there are so many phases of my life where my routine was one thing, and then, I don't know, I had a kid or something like that, and everything gets jumbled up, and like everything changes, and you're like, okay, I guess this is the new routine, but you adjust. And so what I always tell people if they're looking to make a switch to fresh food is just try it for 30 days. Like, set the budget aside for 30 days, set the time aside for 30 days, and see what happens with your pet. And at the end of 30 days, evaluate, is it worth it? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. If you see a drastic difference in your pet, you might find ways to adjust the time or the budget. Maybe the budget, you're going to adjust half. You're going to decide, I'm going to, allocate some more here. I'm going to do this more here. It doesn't have to be all or none. But I think the first step is to commit to 30 days and then figure out what you're going to adjust and where.
Shout out, by the way, to budgeting in general. So I would say, just if you're considering something like this, or you want to add something to your budget, just want to throw this out there. If you just start budgeting everything, you'll find you have more than you think to go to things that you would like to go somewhere else, right? That's typically what happens there. So And I think due to that, because the thing we're talking about is you can make some kind of change. And I think it's really ultimately, and most cost stuff comes down to this kind of more in a philosophical sense, which is just a paradigm shift. If your dog is not doing well health-wise, then the price that you're feeding for that food is not the cost of what it takes to make your dog healthy. And again, there are things you could do that cost no money. You could try feeding once a day. That you could try just taking that egg out of the fridge and taking some of the food away and doing that. So it doesn't have to be a lot, but we do have to look at the fact that if you have a golden who's 8 years old and you're like, oh, he's totally healthy, he just gets ear infections a couple times a year and he's got a slight limp and he has this hot spot. I hear that kind of stuff all the time. You have to think to yourself, what I've been doing isn't the actual cost of what it is to keep my dog or cat healthy. And so that's when you can kind of make some like inbound decisions. And the time thing, Kelley is 100% right about that. I remember when my daughter was born and I was like, oh crap, I don't have time to do anything. Yeah. Well, I was like, well, the first month or so, you're like, okay, this is, and I remember thinking to myself before that everyone has time to do what I do when they feed. And then we had Maple and I was like, oh, I don't have time to do that. I mean, I have time to do that now because she's older. But what I'm saying is there were times in my life when I was so grateful for Just Greens and Bailey's Blend because, I'm not going to cut up sprouts on the spot. I don't have time to do any of that kind of stuff. And also too, I think the time-wise, I would encourage people to take on what works for them. Here's a great example. I love to vary up Huckleberry's diet I use a bunch of Green Juju products, but then I add other things like berries and things, that's around the house. And when I change up his diet, I just do what's available to me. I am not the type of person who's like, I'm going to switch to a raw diet and do a prep day. That's going to take an entire Sunday for the entire month. I have no desire to do that. And I also have no time to do that. And so Kelley knows I got too many Christmas markets to go to. So for me, I can vary up his diet a lot on a day-to-day basis. And I don't really prep anything. I just have stuff available that I can use within that system. And I can feed him within 5 minutes if I have to, or take, 20 minutes to kind of carefully lay stuff out. It just depends what you want to do.
No, I love that. Like I often try to reflect as much as possible on what it was like when Charlie and I transitioned Milka's diet from Kibble to a raw food diet. And the biggest thing I was worried about, I would probably say, was cost. I mean, back then, I think Milka's food was probably costing us maybe $20. But her vet bills were in the hundreds of dollars. And when I seen okay, her food might cost me $100, I was really hesitant about, transitioning Milka to a raw food diet. I'm like, oh, it's so much money. And what I seen and what you said, Kelley, try it for 30 days. Actually, yeah, after 30 days, I would say I seen massive improvements in her health. And I did see Milka's vet bills dramatically decrease, and she was healthier at the same time. So I had a healthier animal, and she was on a better diet.
So 2 interesting things there. One is the vet bills. Absolutely. I found that talking about that piece is more difficult. It's not a big selling point. It's hard to convince people of that, but it is so true. But the really interesting thing you said is that you could totally afford it. However, it was still a lot. And we have a perception of how much our pet food should cost.
Yes.
And it has nothing to do with what we can afford or our budget or what we feed ourselves or anything like that. It's just, I have bought my dog a bag of $75 food for however many years, and this is how much it should cost. And if it's going to go to $300, that's too much. And this is me speaking from having a bigger dog, obviously, or 2 dogs. But yeah, it's that shift of well, what are we getting out of that $75 bag? How healthy is my dog? How many ear infections are we getting? How often do we go to the vet? Like, what's their longevity look like? And so I think that is a really tough mental block to get through, but it's such an important one. And I think that 30-day period really puts that into context. So that's why I really challenge people to just like try it for 30 days, just see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to think back because Milka, she was having hot spots. She was having like just so many digestive concerns like throwing up and diarrhea and whatnot. And within, I would probably say 2 weeks, she has seen massive improvements. So, and that's what led us to really doing research and to trying to figure out, why are so many people against feeding a raw food diet, but then it helped my animal so much. And we see that the demand for fresh food is definitely growing more and more.
Hey there! Before we continue, I just want to share a little secret just for our podcast listeners today. A special discount code for you. At our pet wellness store, Pathogenic, we do offer Green Juju freeze-dried raw meals and treats. So if you're ready to add some fresh, high-quality food to your pet's diet, visit pathogenic.us and use the code FRESH for 10% off your next order. Plus, you enjoy free shipping on qualifying orders within the US. Again, that's pathogenic.us, code FRESH for 10% off Green Juju. Terms and conditions apply. And we're back.
Well, and that's also, something I was talking to Keith about recently, because we were just talking about, it was actually kind of funny. We were in the car for, I don't know, 4 hours, 3 or 4 hours. And it was it was just nutrition the whole time. So it was a very interesting, deep nutrition conversations. But the one thing we were talking about was just the veterinary community in general and their perception of raw food and how they relate that to their clients. So what we're seeing a lot of is someone who maybe is not into raw food or doesn't want you to feed raw food. The number one go-to is to say, well, there's no science that backs up X, Y, and Z. Well, but the problem with that is, to that owner, you fed your dog a new diet for 2 weeks and you saw a bunch of health issues clear up. There's nothing that's going to convince you that that's not the right direction to take because you've seen it with your own eyes. So, I would encourage anyone listening to this that, yes, we need to look at all these issues, and I look at studies all the time, but you are your pet's best advocate. And so when it comes to that, when they're healthy and when you're not more than anyone else. And so one of the things I was saying to him was the reason why raw feeding is so prevalent now is because it works. If the things that were happening that people say that are against raw feeding happened, people wouldn't do it. If a lot of animals were getting sick, but that stuff doesn't really happen. And so, especially now with the advancements in technology and things like that, when it comes to food safety. But I think that's an interesting point, because when we see those changes ourselves, that's it. That's all there is to it. We're on the right path.
Mm-hmm. And speaking about food safety, because it is a big concern, are there any safety precautions pet parents should keep in mind when introducing fresh food to the diet? And how can people ensure that they are balancing fresh additions with their pet's overall nutritional needs?
I'm going to let Billy take the bulk of this, but I just want to say, preparing your pet's food is no different than preparing your own food. And whether it's processed food or it's fresh, raw food, you need to be washing your hands and all the things you're using all the time. There are more pathogens detected in processed food than there are in fresh food because they're more strictly regulated. Well, not strictly regulated isn't the right word, but that food safety measures in fresh food are
much higher. Yeah.
Yes. So always wash your hands, no matter what you're feeding. Wash your hands, wash your bowls, wash your spoons, like all the things. It's just like handling the raw meat that you're going to make for dinner for your family. You would never, touch a steak and then go work on your computer. It's the exact same thing.
Yeah. And I mean, I think most people don't ever touch, in feeding the frozen food, whatever, the freeze dried food, all that stuff, I don't really ever touch it. So I think I just mean like I'm using a spoon or I'm using, I'm just envisioning, when you said that, I'm just envisioning someone just taking our food and going like this and throwing it into the bowl, like with their hands.
I've definitely barehanded a patty before.
Yeah, especially when you're talking about Green Juju. I mean, you're talking about the highest quality ingredients. I think we really set the standard for that in the industry. And that goes back to, when it comes to pathogen mitigation in food, that goes back to our sourcing, and that goes back to reducing pathogens through sourcing the animals correctly. It goes through, being in an incredible facility that runs all of these, safety precautions throughout the process, including high pressure processing, which, we know eliminates those pathogens. So it's making it a lot safer. And then the other part too, and I guess this is kind of just a tangent, but it just came into my mind, is, one of the things that people talk about a lot too, is, oh, well, as long as we're being safe as people, dogs can handle pathogens better than humans, which is true, but that doesn't mean we need to necessarily just inundate their body with pathogens. Like if you look at some of the microbiome testing that like Animal Biome does, you can see these buildups of things like E. coli. So, it doesn't mean we should be doing those things. So something like Green Juju, I think, offers a better solution for that. And yeah, I would just echo what Kelley said. I mean, just take any precaution you would with any food that you normally cook or prepare.
And also you can reach out to the company that you're purchasing from, and you can figure out what their food safety protocols are. For example, with us, we do use HPP, like Billy said. We also do test and hold. So we have test and hold means that we test every single batch for pathogens, and we don't ship it out until we have the results back. And so for any batch that you have, any of those 48 bags, we can look back and say, okay, there's the lot code, and here's the test result saying that it's negative for all these pathogens. And so you can reach out to whoever you're working with and say, what do you do in regards to this? Do you have negative test results? Like, what can you show me? And so that can give people some peace of mind that the product they have in their hands is truly pathogen free.
That's a very excellent point. So if you are considering feeding a fresh food diet, then going with a pet food and being able to reach out to the manufacturers of the pet food to ask for these what would you say? Would you ask them for a test, or like how would you?
You can't. I mean, I would probably start with just saying, what are your food safety protocols?
Okay.
And then beyond there, if they say we test every batch, or if they say we do test and hold, and if you're curious about test results for some reason, you can ask. I would say it's probably overkill to ask for every batch that you get.
Of course.
Please don't make us do that.
But just knowing that like this company's policy could give you some peace of mind. So yeah.
Then I guess I would have another follow-up question to this. It's like, what are your thoughts on a pet parent maybe getting meat from a supermarket? Because supermarkets work a little bit differently than pet food.
So the pet food industry has a zero tolerance for pathogens, meaning us as a pet food company, we cannot put something into distribution with known pathogens in it. Grocery stores assume you're going to cook your food. So and cooking would kill that pathogen. Billy can speak more to this probably, but it's different for sure.
Yeah, there's a like a 20% allowance for, say, salmonella in chicken. Yeah. And so you just have to assume that if you're doing that, you're going to get some of that. I guess you could reduce that through sourcing and some of those other things. But you just have to go into that knowing that there's going to be some of that. It's actually interesting because sometimes, when I've seen recalls in the past and I've seen comments from people that are like, oh, this is why I make my own raw food. It's like, well, I hate to break it to you, but there's actually more pathogens in the raw food that you make at home, more likely. So, it just goes back to all those precautions, because, all that stuff is just genuinely kind of ubiquitous in nature. My other food safety thing that I think is kind of funny is because people bring up like kids, but I don't fear that at all. The only reason Maple can't feed huckleberries because I don't let her, because I like doing it too much. So that's just that's kind of how that is. So it just depends on how you want to. Where do you want to put your risk, basically? And I think we do a really good job of mitigating that risk and still providing something that's an actual like raw product.
Yeah, it's so interesting, honestly, like to really think about this, because for a very, very long time, Charlie and I did do DIY raw food, where we did buy meat from a supermarket, but there's only so much we can actually really do to minimize the risk of pathogenic bacteria in the food. And to hear that, even though it does seem that the raw food industry, especially within America, is quite strict, it is also in a way, I guess, kind of good. Like, what are your actual thoughts on that? Like the zero tolerance.
Without something to inactivate or to kill those pathogens, you are just going to. It is impossible to keep pathogens out of food, and so that's where the butting heads comes in with some companies and the FDA. Is the FDA is saying, hey, this is a zero tolerance policy. You can't test positive at all, and they're saying, hey, we're doing X, Y, and Z, but these naturally exist. And that's the hardest part, is without something, say, like high pressure processing, all of these things, bacteria doesn't just come from the meat. It's everywhere. It takes things from its environment. We know that through studies in milk and all these different things. So the problem is, if you don't have something like high pressure processing from a legal standard, you're going to get into trouble there. But also, if you're a consumer and you're really looking to mitigate that, there's just no way that I've seen from a science standpoint to actually eliminate pathogens without doing something like, say, high pressure processing.
Okay. That was I just actually was curious about that. Moving on, and we kind of already touched on this, but the role that Green Juju products play into supporting a fresh food diet. So what kind of diets do you guys offer for pet parents? Because you don't only offer just one single type of diet, but the formulations of the products that you also offer are quite unique.
Yeah, we offer a really wide range of limited ingredient diets, and we really wanted to I think Kelley's from the very beginning has done novel proteins for the most sensitive animals, and everything I'm about to say, I think, really fits within what Green Juju's done all along. Just as a side note, when Kelley and I make new things, it's just maybe the most fun part for me. I mean, there's a lot of really fun parts because I love my job and I love, this part of it, but is to relate those back to what the mission of Green Juju is. So it doesn't matter if it's food, it doesn't matter if it's, Bam's Beats or whatever it is. I'm trying, we're trying to relate that back to what was the founding principle. So I just think that's really fun. And keeping these diets as limited as possible was really part of that, because Kelley, had two sensitive dogs who we needed limited ingredients. And so the way that we get there is we essentially took out or minimized the muscle meat and replaced that with heart, because you get a much more nutrient dense version of meat in heart. And then we use more kidney and liver. So these because they're so limited, every nutrient has to be really, really efficient. So it essentially has to be the most bioavailable version of every vitamin. And you get that through organ meat. And so each one of those is 3 ingredients from an allergy perspective, outside of the rabbit with duck liver, which is 4. So it's great for sensitive animals that need to do an elimination diet, just, getting on one of those things, and then one of the proteins, and then doing that for, say, a month, and then you could slowly introduce things. Or even if you're just a parent on the go that doesn't have a lot of issues, it's great for that as well. But then the ingredients are so limited. So like if you look at the beef, it's heart, liver, kidney, bone, kale, and kelp, right? So it's basically, and then we preserve that naturally with vitamin E, but it's essentially 5 ingredients. So the other reason we formulated that way is so people could do exactly what you're talking about. If you want to use our milk, if you want to use our veggie blends, if you want to use our mushroom probiotic, whatever it is, you can add those things and still feel comfortable, that you're not, messing up any nutrient profiles or anything like that.
Yeah, that's amazing. Honestly, what I really like about it, because I would probably say, honestly, allergies and allergy-like symptoms is like the top concern that people come to us for. And so a lot of people, they do a lot of different types of food intolerance tests or allergy tests. So feeding them a limited ingredient diet would be such a great way to avoid a lot of the food intolerances while they go in and try to work at the root cause of whatever might be going on with that animal.
One of my biggest struggles as a pet parent was, not surprisingly, finding things to feed them because they were so sensitive. And I would find some great, really limited ingredient thing, and then it had fish oil or something. It was just like that one ingredient that would throw me off, or like 17 ingredients. But it was just such a struggle. And so one of the coolest things about this company is that I've been able to make everything I ever wanted, like everything I ever wanted for my dogs that I couldn't find. And one of the biggest things was just a super simple base. And then depending on which dog it was, what phase they were in, whatever was going on, now we have all of these other things that you could layer on top of it. And whether that's through rotation or just catering to their sensitivities, like you just have so many options. And I felt like before, when I did find a food that worked for the dogs, I was so stuck with that because it was the only thing that worked. And so I love this kind of like, this is coming to mind, but it's so corny, but like kind of like this a la carte thing we have going on where it's just like pick the different things you need to make it work for your dog or rotate through all of them. So that was kind of the dream.
So for anyone listening today or watching this video, what is one small thing that they can do to improve their pet's diet right now? Like if they don't know where to start, like what would you recommend for somebody that is feeding a kibble diet right now, but they are thinking of one small thing to change?
Yeah, and I think too, you can do a whole host of things that don't cost anything. I think and one of those things you can do, which has become a little bit more popular lately as far as like the known health benefits of this is, but take your dog out to the woods more. Take your dog out to these like high microbial environments that they evolved in, and let them roll around, and let them go through a creek, and let them eat
dogs
grass and all those things. And those things aren't just and we know now that those things aren't just like it's kind of like some woo-woo, like, get them out into nature. There's real science that backs this up, not only from like the idea of forest bathing. That's kind of a funny thing to be like, there's real science, try forest bathing.
There is real science.
Exactly. So when it comes to that, but also when it comes to being exposed to all of those bacteria that they usually would be exposed to, and so one of my favorite stories I heard recently was we were talking to Rita Hogan, and she was talking about her dog who lived. There's a little bit of debate in the family, but this dog lived to be either 25 or 27 years old. And what were the hallmarks of this dog? It slept outside a lot. It drank raw milk, and it got human grade scrap food and lived that sort of life. And I when I hear things like that, oddly enough, you would think the first thing that came into my mind there would be raw milk, but it's it's the being out in nature part of that, which I think is just a huge underrated part of it. So all the things Kelley mentioned, those are so easy to do. So imagine now if you combine one of those with one of the options that doesn't cost anything, and then you've already taken a huge step forward.
Yeah.
And that's killing two birds with one stone, because your dog's got to get out anyways. So just take them somewhere new and, somewhere foresty, and get your forest bathing benefits for both of you.
Especially when we were living in Dubai, I never realized how many dogs actually do not really get outside in nature. Like a lot of the times they might live in a high-rise building, and then they get in their car and then they drive to a daycare that has fake grass, and like that entire day there's no exposure to actual earth, soil, sand, whatever it might be, where, as you said, the beneficial bacteria would lay to support the microbiome of the dog. So I love that, just try to get outside no matter where you are, get in nature, let your dog sniff. It's, first of all, it's healthy for them. It's really important.
That's exactly my dog. He's here, he's downstairs, and he's sitting in a computer chair, and he loves that. But, we walk through the city and we come here, and he gets a good amount of exercise. He gets like 2 miles a day, but we're not out in the woods very often, which is one of the reasons I'm so passionate about bringing products to the market that exemplify that, like, our wild fermented products, some of those things that bring those microbes into the bowl. So I think that's very important.
So the next question I have for you guys, and I know you guys are working on a lot of different things. What is next for you and Green Juju? Is there any new exciting projects?
Somewhere Antoine's ears are burning. Antoine is our business.
To say the wrong thing.
Yeah, he's the third part of the triangle, and he's our business.
I love
development
that. That's
guy.
a really good way to say that.
Yeah, he's our business development guy, and he keeps us in line. So sometimes we'll be doing a live, and he'll just look up at us, and we'll know if we're headed in the right direction or not. So Kelley, what do you think on that? Take it easy. We're not really working on much, or?
Well, last week we just launched freeze-dried versions of all of our blends, and we launched a new Vitality blend, which is a pink, purple in color and more like warming energetically. So those will be coming out in February. We're very excited about those. And then we have a slew of other things coming up next year, which I will say the announcement for our biggest launch of the year will be in just a couple weeks.
Okay. That sounds exciting.
What is it? The second week of January?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So not long to find out what our biggest plans of 2025 will be. But even beyond that, we have some more really exciting things. So I don't know, Billy, would you say this is our biggest year of launches coming up? Probably not. Frozen food is really big this year, but we were supposed to slow down next year, and we absolutely are not.
Okay.
No, the food that we did, the frozen food was huge. But I would say this is very comparable when you look at, the amount of things, and also without giving away the types of things that we're doing. I would say they were pretty on par.
Mm-hmm. Well, for now, we are looking forward to the freeze-dried blends that are coming out sometime in early next year, and whatever you guys are planning in the future. In the meantime, where can people find you if they want to know more?
They can find us through our website, which is greenjuju.com, or Instagram and Facebook, where we are Green Juju Kitchen. If you contact us through Instagram, Facebook, or our contact us page, or info@greenjuju.com, it goes to Billy and I. So we're right here and ready to answer your questions.
Thank you all so much for tuning in to the Next Level Pet Parent podcast today. We hope this episode brought you tons of value today. If you're ready to start adding fresh food to your pet's wellness routine, you can grab Green Juju freeze-dried raw recipes at bodega.us. Don't forget to use your exclusive discount code FRESH. And if you found this episode helpful, please share it with your friends or post about it on social media. It not only helps more pets thrive, but also supports us in growing our podcast and creating more valuable content for you. See you in the next one.